What would you do if the voice calling you from the darkness was your own? I've stared down rifles, walked roads wired with IEDs, heard mortars whistle through black skies. Fear comes in many forms, but nothing in my training prepared me for what I found in the Appalachian Mountains. Because out here, the enemy wasn't something you could see. It wasn't even something you could understand. This is the story command buried under wildlife incident. The one they said was fatigue, stress, maybe a bear. But I was there, and I know what I heard, what I saw. We were 12 men, a stripped-down unit on a routine exercise. 4 days in the Smokies, rotate patrols, test radios in tough terrain, keep logs, nothing dangerous, nothing unusual, just another notch in the training schedule. That's what we thought. But the Smokies don't play by those rules. The fog there doesn't just hide you, it swallows you whole. It rolls down the ridges like it's alive. And the locals, they whisper that the land remembers, that it holds on to things. Old things, dark things. We laughed. Of course we laughed. Soldiers always laugh at ghost stories until the laughing stops. That first night, we made camp near a dry creek bed. The fire burned low, shadows stretching long through the pines. The men were quiet, drifting to sleep, scribbling notes, checking rifles. Routine, predictable, safe. And then I heard it. Not the wind, not an animal. A voice. It came drifting through the fog, faint, like someone humming to themselves. The tune rose and fell, sharp as broken glass, but sweet, almost like a lullaby. At first, I thought maybe one of the guys was joking, until I saw Private Harlan, the local kid, sitting frozen like he'd seen a ghost. His face had drained white. He whispered one word. "Cherokee." An old song, he said. A lullaby, but not the kind you sing to children, the kind you sing to something else. I asked him what it meant. He wouldn't answer. He just shook his head. And as that song carried on the cold wind, soft, sharp, endless, I realized something that made my blood run cold. The mountains weren't empty. They were listening. There were 12 of us. 1 lieutenant, a couple of sergeants, a medic we called Doc, and the rest of us grunts carrying what the Army always gives you. Just enough gear to make you feel prepared, and just enough doubt to know you're not. We had our M4s, optics dialed in, one saw, because nothing says security like belt-fed firepower, sidearms on the hip, NVGs clipped to the helmet, and one thermal scope passed around like treasure every time someone thought they saw movement. On paper, it was simple. 4 days in the Smokies, training patrol, nothing more. Rotate watches, stress test radios through the valleys, keep logs. A quiet exercise in Cherokee country, nothing dangerous, nothing unusual. That's what we thought. We moved slow the first day, working up the old logging roads. Fog wrapped itself around the ridges, thick enough to cut with a knife. 1 minute you could see forever, the horizon spilling in waves of green hills. The next, you couldn't see 10 feet. NVGs turned into static. Thermal gave us blotches that looked more like ghosts than heat. And the silence, God, the silence. Between the winds there was nothing. No birds, no insects, no running water. Just a kind of heavy stillness that pressed into your ears until you realized you were holding your breath. By late evening, we'd settled into a dry creek bed. Standard setup, 4 men on watch, comms check every 15 minutes. Fire kept low so it wouldn't paint a target. Routine, predictable, safe. Or so it felt until we found the footprints. They were on the far edge of the creek, pressed into the mud. At first, we figured they were ours, but when we counted boots, the math didn't work. 11 pairs matched, 1 didn't. These weren't boots, these were bare. Too small to belong to any of us, and too clean. The mud should have clung to the edges, smeared, filled with water. But these prints looked like they'd been stamped in, sharp, deliberate, like something wanted us to see them. Private Johnson, the youngest in the squad, tried to play it off. He grinned and said, "Guess Bigfoot's tailing us." His voice cracked a little when he laughed. The sergeant cut him down quick. "Knock it off, log it, and move on." That was the order. Write it down. Note the time. Keep the mission rolling. But as I stared at those bear prints in the mud, miles from any trail, miles from any home, I felt the first twist of something I didn't want to name. Because soldiers don't spook easy. But that night, a few of us kept glancing back toward the creek bed, waiting to see if those prints might be joined by more.
This fog's getting thicker, Sarge. Can't see past the fire.
Wait, you hear that? Sounds like humming.
Don't start with that ghost story crap again.
No, listen.
Weapons ready.
Something's out there.
The forest froze. Not just quiet. Frozen. No insects, no night birds. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. And then she appeared. At the edge of the fog stood a figure. Frail, hunched, wrapped in a ragged shawl. An old woman, alone, in the middle of the Smokies, at midnight. Her face caught the firelight. Deep lines, hollow cheeks, eyes that didn't blink. And from her lips, the song. That same lullaby we'd heard earlier on the wind. Sweet, sharp, wrong. I felt the hair on my neck rise. She wasn't lost. She wasn't confused. She was watching us. The lieutenant raised his voice, calm, controlled. "Ma'am, stop right there. Identify yourself." She didn't speak. She just smiled. And then she moved. The shawl slipped from her arm, and what came out wasn't human. Her skin was stone gray, jagged, glinting in the firelight. And her hand ended in one finger, long and sharp like a blade. Before anyone could react, she lunged. The finger punched straight into Private Collins' chest. He gasped, dropped his weapon, and fell without a sound. We opened fire. M4s cracked, the saw thundered, muzzle flashes cutting through the fog. But the round sparked against her skin, sparks bouncing like we were shooting steel. She didn't bleed. She didn't fall. She just laughed. It wasn't a laugh you'd hear from a person. It rattled in your chest, deep and hollow, like the mountain itself was mocking us. And then, as quick as she had come, she stepped backward, fading into the fog, gone. We swarmed Collins. Doc tore open his vest, hands shaking, searching for a wound. But there was nothing. No hole, no blood, no broken skin, just nothing. His chest rose shallow. His pulse fluttered, his eyes already dimming. Doc whispered, voice low, almost to himself. "It's like something inside him has been taken." No one answered. No one could. The fire hissed. The fog pressed closer. And out there, somewhere beyond the trees, the lullaby rose again. Soft, endless, patient. And I knew. She wasn't done with us.
Help me.
Sarge, the radio. You hearing this?
Yeah. That's not possible.
He's right here.
We had dragged Collins into the shallow cut of the creek bed, his body limp, skin pale, pulse weak. Doc worked on him with steady hands, but there was nothing to fix. No wound, no hole, just a man fading away from the inside out. And then, the net erupted. The radio spat static, sharp, broken, cutting through the fog like shattered glass. Wicks adjusted the dial, muttering curses under his breath. He was trying to get command on the line, voice clipped, professional, like the training said. Bravo 1 to command, radio check. Do you copy? The static hissed, and then it spoke.
Help me.
Every man froze. It was Collins' voice. He lay right there beside us, lips blue, too weak to lift his head. And yet, clear as daylight, his voice poured from the handset. Help me. I'm cold. The sound of it crawled into my chest and stayed there. This wasn't distortion. This wasn't feedback. It was him. The lieutenant snatched the handset, voice sharp. Command, identify. Who's transmitting? Silence. Then the static shifted, warping, stretching like something alive crawling through the wires. The voice came again. Collins. But wrong. Slowed, drawn out, each word bent until it was no longer human. Come to me. The air felt heavier. The fog pressed closer. My ears rang with every pulse of the static. Johnson's eyes darted from the handset to Collins's real body. Still slumped against the log, chest rising shallow, breath rattling like a broken machine. And yet the voice begged again. Please, help me. It's dark. It wasn't him. Not anymore. The lieutenant ripped the handset away, thumbed the release, and tore the battery out. The noise cut instantly, but the silence that followed was worse. We sat there with rifles clutched too tight, fingers whitening on the grips. The creek bed felt like a coffin. Fog spilled in from the trees, thick, damp, alive. Every breath came short and shallow, like the mountain itself wanted us to choke. Collins' head lolled sideways, eyes half open, unblinking. Doc kept checking him, muttering, trying to find anything to hold on to. But there was nothing. Nothing but the sound of blood moving too slow. And then, just faint enough to doubt and just sharp enough to chill, the lullaby floated again. Not from the trees, not from the fire. From the headset Wicks had dropped in the mud. That soft, haunting tune slithered out of the speaker, each note clearer than the last. A woman's voice. Calm, patient, ancient. We stared at it like it might start moving on its own. And in that moment, I understood. She wasn't just out there in the woods. She wasn't just circling the camp. She was already inside the net, inside our radios, inside our voices. And if she could reach us through that, there was nowhere left to hide. We couldn't stay in the creek bed. The fog pressed too close, the trees too tight. Sergeant Kane barked the order. Move uphill, find high ground. So we hauled Collins' limp body between us and pushed toward a rocky outcrop we'd marked earlier on the map. The climb was slow. Every step sank into leaves, slick with mist. The fire was long behind us now, just a memory swallowed by fog. The forest felt different, closer, trees crowding in, branches crossing like bars of a cage. By the time we reached the lookout shack, a rotted shell of timber used decades ago by hunters, the night had swallowed everything. We dropped Collins inside, propped against the wall. Doc tried again, but nothing changed. His pulse fluttered, faint, like it belonged to someone else. That's when the voices started. At first, faint, like echoes. "Johnson." We froze. It was a woman's voice, soft, broken. Private Johnson spun toward the trees, rifle raised. "Mom?" His whisper cracked. That sounded like my mom. Then another. "Harlan?" Private Harlan stiffened. That one was his father's voice, clear as a bell, drifting through the fog. It didn't stop there. "Kane." A gravelly voice, sharp with authority. Sergeant Kane's head snapped toward the sound. It was his old drill instructor. And then, the worst one of all, my own. It came from somewhere behind me, deep in the fog. My own voice, calm, certain. "Keep moving forward. It's safe." My throat dried. My stomach knotted. Hearing your own voice, your own, coming from the dark is something no man is built to process. Johnson broke first. He surged toward the sound of his mother's voice, ignoring Kane's order to hold position. "Johnson, stand down!" Kane shouted, but it was too late. Johnson vanished into the fog. We chased, flashlights cutting through the mist. For a few moments, his silhouette flickered between the trunks. Rifle slung, head tilted, chasing something only he could hear. Then he was gone. No scream, no struggle, just gone. We found his gear 10 minutes later, rifle on the ground, pack torn loose, helmet tilted sideways in the mud. No sign of him, not a drop of blood, not a print, just absence. Harlan whispered. It took him, just like it took Collins. His voice trembled, cracking at the edges. The lieutenant tried to keep order, shouting for discipline, but it rang hollow. Fear doesn't care about rank. The voices didn't stop. If anything, they multiplied. From the left, from the right, from above. Family, friends, even the dead. One voice after another, weaving together into a chorus that shouldn't exist. And then, the lullaby joined them. That same song we'd heard since the first night. Sweet, sharp, patient. Carried on the fog like a net drawing tighter. Uwe lana chiku, susa sai. Harlan clamped his hands over his ears, rocking against the shack wall. Kane shouted at him to hold it together, but the sergeant's own voice shook. Doc muttered prayers under his breath. And me. I just stared into the fog, waiting for the moment the voices would call my name again. Because deep down, I knew. Once they spoke it, I'd follow too. The voices had finally gone quiet. Not gone, just waiting. The forest held its breath like a predator crouched in the brush. The fog pressed in against the shack walls until it felt like the trees themselves were leaning over us, listening. That's when we heard it, crying. Not the song, not mimicry. Crying, soft, high. The kind of sound that cuts straight through a soldier's armor. A child's voice. It came from the edge of our perimeter, somewhere past the rocks, where the fog bled into the timber. A boy, maybe 7, maybe 8, sobbing into the night. Private Harlan's head snapped up. It's just a kid, he whispered, eyes wide. We can't leave him out there. Kane growled. No kids out here, not in this. But then we heard it again. A whimper, a broken plea. Help me, please. The sound clawed at my chest. Everything in me wanted to believe it, that maybe, somehow, there really was a lost boy out there. The lieutenant hesitated, jaw tight. Then he ordered, hold your position. But orders don't always stick when humanity cuts deeper than discipline. One of the privates, Mason, rose to his feet, rifle hanging low. I'm checking, he muttered, voice shaking. If it was my kid, I'd want someone to help. We hissed at him to stop. Kane cursed under his breath, but Mason kept walking. Slow steps into the fog. Toward the sound of the crying child, he disappeared from sight after 10 feet, and then the crying stopped. The silence that followed was sharp, electric. My pulse hammered against my ribs. A heartbeat later, the fog split, and she was there. Not a child, not a boy. The hag, Spearfinger. The same stone-gray skin, the same jagged face, and that terrible spear-like finger glinting in the dim light. She lunged at Mason, her arm driving forward. Mason screamed, stumbling backward, scrambling for his rifle. He barely had time to bring it up before she was on him. We opened fire, every weapon in the squad thundering at once. Muzzle flashes tore through the fog, bullets sparking against her skin. She staggered under the barrage, not wounded but forced back, step by step, until the mist swallowed her again. Mason crawled back into the perimeter, gasping, eyes wide with terror. His vest was torn, chest plate cracked, but somehow he was still alive. Barely. And that's when it hit us. She could change, not just voices, not just mimicry on the radio. She could wear faces, a child, a parent, even one of us. The realization sank like a blade. If she could look like anyone, then who could we trust? The lieutenant scanned the squad, breathing hard. His eyes moved from one man to the next. And for the first time since the mission began, I saw fear in his face. Because now, it wasn't just about what was out there in the trees. It was about the man standing right next to you. And whether he was real at all. We were running out of time and out of men. Collins lay unconscious. Johnson was gone, Mason barely breathing. Fear had hollowed us out until all that remained was instinct, and instinct said fight. That's when Harlan spoke up. He crouched by the fire pit, whispering like the trees were listening. My grandmother, she told stories, Cherokee stories. Spearfinger, she hides her heart in her right hand. That's the only way to kill her. Kane growled, "What the hell are you talking about, kid?" But I believed him. The old woman, the stone skin, the spear finger that tore into Collins without leaving a mark. It fit. Too well. The lieutenant didn't hesitate. Then that's our play. We burn bright. We draw her in. We tore through our packs, pulling every scrap we had. Rations, spare clothes, extra logs. We built a blaze that roared high, flames licking up through the fog. The smoke curled thick and black, cutting the night like a signal flare. And it worked. The lullaby rose again, closer, louder. The sound of stone scraping stone carried through the trees. Branches cracked. The fog churned. Then she came. Spearfinger charged from the tree line in full form, towering, stone-skinned, her mouth smeared red, eyes glowing like coals. That terrible finger gleamed as she thrust it forward, hungry for another chest. "Contact front," Kane roared. We opened fire. M4s spat fury. The saw hammered. Grenades thumped and burst against her hide. Sparks flew. Smoke rolled. The shack walls rattled. But she kept coming. Bullets ricocheted like pebbles off armor. She laughed, that hollow sound that made the ground tremble.
Left flank! Push left! Pin her down! Bravo 2, suppress! Bravo 3, move! Move!
She's not stopping. Jesus, she's not stopping.
She plowed through the perimeter, swatting rifles aside, hurling men back like rag dolls. Mason screamed as her finger grazed his vest, cracking the plate like glass. The fire drew her, just like Harlan said. Her head tilted, eyes fixed on the blaze, body trembling with hunger. She raised her hand, the right hand, and then I saw it. Through the stone skin, through the cracks that flared with heat, something glowed. A pulsing ember, small but alive, beating in rhythm like a heart. Her weakness. I didn't think. I just moved. Diving through smoke, I dropped my rifle, yanked my blade free. She swung her spear finger at my chest, but I slid under, sparks blinding as stone scraped steel. The glow pulsed again, inside her hand. I drove the blade into it. She screamed, not like a person, not like anything human. The sound ripped through the valley, high and low at once, rattling bone, shaking trees, shredding fog. Men dropped their rifles, clutching their ears, faces twisted in pain. Her body convulsed, stone cracking, light bursting from the wound in her hand. She staggered back into the fire, skin splitting, mouth open in that endless howl. Then she fell. The ground shook as Spearfinger collapsed, her body shattering into shards of stone that hissed and smoked against the flames. The echo of her scream carried across the ridgeline, fading, fading, until only silence remained. For the first time in 2 nights, the mountain was still. But it wasn't victory. Not really. Because we all knew what Collins had lost, what Johnson had become. And that silence. Silence never lasts long in these hills. Dawn crept over the ridgeline like nothing had happened. The fog thinned, the birds started again, and the world pretended the night before hadn't torn holes through it. By mid-morning, backup arrived. Humvees grinding up the logging road, radios chattering with routine codes. They looked at the shattered camp, the burned-out fire pit, the broken gear scattered like bones. But they didn't ask the right questions. The official report wrote itself. Bear attack during training. The missing filed as AWOL. Men who had walked off into the night. Collins was tagged as medical evac. Condition unstable. Not one word about a stone-skinned witch. Not one mention of voices in the fog. We signed the papers because what else could we do? You don't argue with the Army's version of events. You don't write monster in the incident log. You swallow the truth and carry the lie. But the locals knew. They didn't speak of it. Not directly. But when we passed through town, their eyes followed us. Heavy, knowing, pitying. Old faces lined by years of silence. They'd seen this before. They'd buried their own stories. They didn't need ours. Weeks later, back on base, I tried to push it down. The drills, the marches, the endless cycle of orders. Routine is supposed to scrape your mind clean. But the nights are never quiet anymore. Sometimes, when the radio hisses to life on an empty channel, when the static crawls under my skin, I hear her again, not singing, not laughing, whispering one word, liver, and I know. Spearfinger isn't gone. She's just waiting for the fire to burn again. If you made it this far, thank you for listening to this chilling story of the Appalachian Mountains. If it kept you on edge, do me a favor. Hit the like button, drop a comment sharing your thoughts, and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next terrifying encounter. And if you really enjoyed it, share it with someone who loves a good scare. Stay safe out there, because some stories never end.